All right, we have seen to time travel to, well, let's see. We have seen to time travel to Albania, one of the best countries in the Balkans. Do not at me, please. But today, seriously, on a serious note, we're going to touch on the, well, religion, mostly Islam, but there will be Catholics and stuff and Jews and stuff like that as well in the video. But today, we're really going to touch on the, well, Islam and how the communist elites, especially those in the early days, were not really against Islam, but due to a lot of stuff and the Cold War and the Sino-Soviet split and the Albanian Sino split, which won't be popping up, but will be hinted at and will be around the time that these things happen. We will pretty much go and, well, have that. And we'll see how the Hermit Kingdom has deal with, and will deal with Islam. So anyway, sit back, relax. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you next time. This has been curiously pretty interesting. Anyway, I set the video for 2 minutes of an intro. So anyway, we're going to really talk about a lot of stuff like red and black on my chest with the eagle on my chest, because it's good to be Albanian, my friend. Anyway, on a serious note, ladies, gentlemen, NB, we're going to look at Islam in the Communist or the People's Republic of Albania. Whoa, what is that? Hey, come, my friend, come here. Are you Albanian or are you Namibian? Really gonna get the Namibian joke going again, huh? Anyway, enjoy. So in the aftermath of World War II, the communist regime came to power and Muslims, most from southern Albania, were represented from early on within the communist leadership group, such as the leader Enver Hoxha from 1908 to 1985, his deputies Mehmet Shanu from 1913 to 1981, and others. Albania's society was still traditionally divided between four religious communities. In the Albania census of 1945, Muslims were 72% of the population, 17.2% were Orthodox, and 10% were Catholic. The communist regime, through the concept of national unity, attempted to forge a national identity that transcended and eroded these religious and other differences with the aim of forming a unitary Albanian identity. Albanian communists viewed religion as a societal threat that undermined the cohesiveness of the nation. As Marx would say, it was the opium of the masses, quote unquote. Within this context, religion like Islam was denounced as foreign, and clergy such as the Muslim muftis were criticized as being socially backward with the propensity to become agents of other states and undermine Albanian interests. The Beshteki order at a congress in May 1945 reaffirmed with their statuses and their statuses its independence from the Sunni community in Albania. In 1949, a law was passed that required religious institutions to inclinate feelings of loyalty among their adherents to the Albanian Communist Party, and that all religions and all religious groups had their headquarters in Albania. Akin to the Orthodox, the Beshteki entered into agreements with the communist state without difficulties, which defined what was considered acceptable activity with their religious clergy and the declaration of participation in the communist propaganda campaigns. The communists during this time treated the Beshteki somewhat differently, as part of their clergy and adherents were casualties during the fighting of World War II and in World War II, while Albanian communist elites had Beshteki or were Beshteki heritage. Whereas the Sunni Muslim clergy, individuals such as the Mustafar Ifidi Voroshi, the Mufti of Doras, Hevad Ibrahim Dibra, former Great Mufti of Albania, and Ismail Pazari, a prominent Sheikh from Tehran, were accused by the communists of collaborating with the Axis occupying forces and imprisoned. Religious leaders were selected by and acted as proxies for the Communist Party, and the process was violent with Sunni Muslim leaders. Religious leaders were selected by and acted as proxies for the Communist Party, and the process was violent, with the Sunni Muslim leaders imprisoned and killed, while the Beshtekis' heads while the Bashtaki head, suffered a similar fate, and by 1947 the communist regime had imprisoned 44 Muslim clergy. Unlike their Christian counterparts in Albanian jail, the Muslim clergy imprisoned by the communist regime received little to no attention internationally regarding their plight apart from the diaspora of Albanians and Albanian organizations. The Sunni Albanian community by 1949 under Grand Mustafi Hafiz Musa Ali attempted to attain some measures and conditions from Enver Hoxha. Some of those included financial assistance, the exemption of future Muslim clergy during army service, which was supported, while a translation of the Quran into Albanian was rejected. In 1950, the communist government implemented Act 743 that outlined measures for negotiating the status of the four religions in Albania. The Sunni community at the time was run by the main council, and its finances came from budget subsidies and property donations. As the Bashtaki order in Albania was worldwide headquarters of Bashtakiism, contact with the outside communities to link them were allowed by the communists, though denied from other religions in Albania. In 1955, Heza Sulaiman Motoro became the Grand Mustafi of the Muslim community from May 1966 to February 1967, and Hafiz Isad Mayafatia was the last Grand Mustafi of Albania of the communist era. After 1945, material wealth, institutional property, and land such as the Muslim Waqf of the religious communities in Albania were confiscated by the state to limit the ability of the religious communities to be economically self-sufficient and reliant. The Madrasa of Tehran was closed down in 1965, while mosques had until 1965 undergone a state of dilapidation due to meager finances for repair. Muslim architectural heritage was perceived by the Albanian communists, to be the unwanted vestiges of the Ottoman period used for converting Albanians into Muslims. In 1965, the communist regime initiated a cultural revolution, based on the Chinese model, that saw the wide-scale destruction of most mosques and minarettes due to them being a prominent feature of the Islamic architecture. By 1967, only 60 Bashtaki texts were left functioning and pretty much unscathed. Within the context of the communist regime's anti-religious policies from the 1960s onwards, parents were encouraged to give newborn children non-religious given names, and these were considered proper Albanian names and often ascribed a supposedly Illyrian or Illyric and pagan origin, while given an associated name of a Muslim or other religious traditions were strongly discouraged. Illyric means good. The communist Albanian political establishment approached Islam as a faith of the Ottoman invader. During the communist era, during communism, numerous historians from Albania with nationalist perspectives, like Ramadan Marlalaku, Christo Foroshidri, Shekidar Alima, Stefaku Pulio, Shadak Rezaz, and Arbin Puto intentionally emphasized the Turkish savagery and the heroic Christian resistance against the Ottoman invader and the Ottoman state in Albania. Few scholars that resisted those anti-Islamic and anti-Turkish propaganda trends were persecuted, while the communist regime highlighted myths related to the medieval Albanians by interpreting them as the heroic Illyrian proletariat. Secularization, iconoclasm, and persecution. 1967 to, the end of it all. Inspired by Pascual Vasquez's late 19th century poem for the need to overcome religious differences through Albanian unity, Hoxha took the stanza "The faith of the Albanians is Albanianism" and implemented it literally as a state policy. In 1967, therefore, the communist regime declared Albania to be the only non-religious and atheist country in the world, banning all forms of religious practice in public. The Muslim, Sunni, and Beshteki clergy, along with their Catholic and Orthodox counterparts, suffered severe persecution, and to prevent the decentralization of authority in Albania, many of their leaders were killed. Juma, or the communal Fridays in the mosque that involved their sermon afterwards, were banned in Albania due to their revolutionary association that posed a threat to the communist regime. People who still perform religious practices did so in secret, while others who were found out were persecuted, and their personal possessions of religious literature, such as the Quran, were forbidden. Among the Beshteki adherents, transmission of knowledge became limited to within a few family circles that mainly resided in the countryside. Mosques became a target for Albanian communists who saw their continued existence as exerting an ideological presence in the mind of the people. Through the demise of the mosque and in religion in general within Albania, the regime sought to alter and serve the social basis of religion that laid within the traditional religious structure among the people and replace it with communism. Islamic buildings were hence appropriated by the communist state and were often turned into things such as gathering places, sports halls, warehouses, barns, restaurants, cultural centers, and even cinemas, in an attempt to erase their links between the religious buildings and the people. The communist regime true policy destroyed the Muslim way of life and Islamic culture within Albania. In 1967, within the space of 7 months, the communist regime destroyed 2,169, not so nice, but the obligatory nice, religious buildings and other monuments, especially mosques. Of those were some 530 tekis, toribs, and dergahs, saint shrines that belonged mainly to the Beshteki order. Pilgrimage thereafter among the Beshteki adherents of those shrines became limited and occurring only in certain locations and indirectly through gatherings like picnics near those sites such as the Shalitek shrine or Tarib in Khurje. While some 740 mosques were destroyed, some of which were prominent and architectural importance like the Kwalabi Mosque in Katowice, the Clock Mosque in Pequin, and the two-door mosque in El Bosta, dating back to the 17th century. Of the roughly 1,127 Islamic buildings existing in Albania prior to the communists coming to power, only 50 mosques remained thereafter, with most being in a state of disrepair. Some number of mosques that were deemed structures of cultural importance and historic value by the communists did survive, and they were kind of like UNESCO World Heritage Sites before and after. The Modida Mosque in Volnia, the Led Mosque in Shekadora, the Narazizi Mosque in Al-Basta, the Led Book and Khakar Mosque, and the Herasin Pasha Mosque in Berat, the Faith Mosque in Doriz, the Faith Mosque in Doriz, the Bazar Mosque in Kroje, the Al-Babigi Mosque in Darabir area, the Mehahor Mosque in Krohik, the Teki Mosque in Garator Kashtar, and the Gin Alaski Mosque in the Sharadi area. Declared also the Monument of Culture, where the Etham Bey Mosque in Tehran was allowed to function as a place of prayer and even Islamic ritual, though only for the foreign Muslim diplomats that would come to Albania. In Tehran during 1991, only 2 mosques were in position of being used for worship after the communist fall, and only 9 Ottoman-era mosques survived the communist dictatorship. Some Albanian Muslims from southern Albania became quickly urbanized along with the Orthodox and Jewish counterparts, and integrated into the state after the war and after communism and after, all that stuff. Alongside the Catholics, the Sunni Albanian Muslim population of central and northern Albania were mainly marginalized and little integrated into the Albanian state. That the 1970s and the 1980s they would experience overpopulation and economic hardship. As such, during the late communist period, the proportion of Catholics and Albanian Muslims of these regions grew larger than the Orthodox communities of southern Albania. Due to the de-emphasizing of religion, some mixed marriages of Muslims with the Orthodox or the Catholics occurred in the late communist period, and we're merely among the elites though. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. Allah Akbar. And till next, wait. I hope you learned something. I hope it was good. There was a cut there. I don't know, like when you go back in, it like literally tells you about all of the stuff that you literally did, and then it like, oh, we're here at 23 minutes. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. A bit fast, a bit slow, but I hope you like it. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. This was pretty good one. I won't say my best, but pretty good one. A bit slow though, but you don't want it to be too fast when you're reading, right? But anyway, hopefully I could get beat by next week, but we'll try one more, and then next week we do Monday to Friday, and then Friday is starting the long videos. So after that, so anyway, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. I hope you think about it. Until next time, I hope you enjoyed. Allah Hoxha Akbar. No wait, that's not right. Allah Akbar. No Hoxha. Learn something. Later. Ladies, gentlemen, NB, till next time, learn something. Yes, we had to do the Allahu Akbar. We had to. In the face, we had to.